Imaging finding a rare coin so rare it could pay off your house today, we're diving into 10 of the most valuable US coins ever found. Real coins worth hundreds and even millions of dollars or more. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss the next rare find. Let's start this.
A penny you could have ignored, dropped in a jar, or handed to a cashier without a second thought. Now imagine that same penny quietly commanding hundreds of thousands of dollars in today's market. Sounds impossible, right? That disbelief you're feeling right now is exactly why fortunes are missed every single day. And tonight, I want to make sure that doesn't happen to you. This story begins in the early 1960s, a time when America was redefining power, prosperity, and possibility. Factories were running day and night, money was moving fast, and the US Mint was under intense pressure to keep up with demand. In that rush, something extraordinary slipped through. A 1960 Lincoln penny struck at the Denver Mint, marked with a simple D, left the presses carrying a flaw so rare, so desirable, that collectors today compete fiercely for the chance to own it. This is not just a coin. This is a silent survivor of a manufacturing moment that history never meant to repeat. Now here's where the fear should kick in, and I mean healthy fear. Because coins like this don't announce themselves. They don't glow. They don't come with warning labels. They sit quietly in drawers, cigar boxes, inherited collections, and old coffee cans. And every year, people unknowingly give away what could have been a financial turning point. Let me ask you something uncomfortable but important. How many old coins have passed through your hands without a second look? How many are still sitting somewhere in your home right now? The 1960 Lincoln penny era stands apart because of its unique mint characteristics, including highly sought-after mint mark irregularities and strike anomalies that experts immediately recognize. In elite collecting circles, demand for this coin has exploded. One exceptional specimen has been valued as high as $734,000, and that number isn't random. It's driven by scarcity, condition, and the unstoppable hunger of collectors who understand one truth very well: coins like this are not being made again. Ever. And when supply is frozen and demand keeps rising, prices don't politely climb. They surge. Here's the exciting part. This isn't about luck. This is about awareness. Wealthy collectors didn't become wealthy by accident. They trained themselves to recognize opportunity where others saw nothing. And the US coin market is one of the last remaining arenas where everyday people can still uncover life-changing value from ordinary objects. That's right. No Wall Street credentials required. Just knowledge, timing, and the courage to act before everyone else catches on. Let's interrupt the seriousness for a second, because I can almost hear someone saying, "Come on, it's just a penny." Fair enough. But let me flip that thought on its head. If I offered you a penny today that could potentially fund a retirement, pay off a mortgage, or create generational wealth, would you still call it just a penny? History has a funny sense of humor like that. It hides its treasures in the smallest places, then watches to see who's paying attention. As the story moves forward, urgency takes the spotlight. The coin market is changing fast. Baby boomers and seasoned collectors are actively selling, while a new wave of high-net-worth buyers is aggressively acquiring the rarest pieces. Coins like the 1960 Lincoln penny era are being pulled into private collections, vaults, and investment portfolios where they may not resurface for decades. Every time that happens, availability shrinks. And when availability shrinks, prices don't wait for permission to rise. This is the moment where excitement meets decision. Because if you own old coins, especially Lincoln pennies from the 1960 era, you are standing at a crossroads. One path leads to ignoring them, delaying, assuming they're common. The other path leads to verification, professional evaluation, and potentially stepping into a completely different financial reality. And here's the truth most people won't tell you: the biggest regret in the coin world isn't buying too early. It's selling too late or not checking at all. By the final act of this story, the message becomes crystal clear. Wealth is not always loud. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it hides in plain sight. And sometimes it takes the form of a small copper coin that outperforms traditional investments and shocks even seasoned professionals. The 1960 Lincoln penny era has become a symbol of that quiet power, a reminder that America's past still holds opportunities for those bold enough to look closer. So tonight, don't dismiss the ordinary. Don't underestimate what you already own. And don't wait for someone else to recognize the value that may already be in your possession. Imagine this for a moment. Somewhere in America, right now, a small copper coin is sitting quietly in a drawer, a jar, maybe even your own pocket, pretending to be ordinary. It doesn't sparkle like gold, it doesn't shout for attention, and yet its current market value has surged to an astonishing $785,000. Yes, you heard that right. A single penny. And here's the part that should stop you cold: most people who own it have absolutely no idea what they're holding. If you've ever dismissed a Lincoln penny as pocket change, this video could be the most financially important 10 minutes of your life. This is the story of the 1964 Lincoln penny, a coin born during one of the most dramatic periods in American history, and transformed by a rare mint error into one of the most aggressively sought-after collectibles in the U.S. market today. And before you think, I don't collect coins, let me ask you something. Did you collect retirement accounts when you were younger, or did you build them slowly over time without realizing how powerful they'd become? Exactly. Wealth doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it whispers. Act 1 begins in 1964, a year defined by change, pressure, and uncertainty. America was facing a massive coin shortage. Silver prices were climbing, the economy was tense, and the U.S. Mint was under enormous strain to produce enough coins to keep commerce moving. In Denver, minting presses were running hard, fast, and non-stop. Speed mattered more than perfection. And that is precisely when history slips through the cracks. Errors happen not because people are careless, but because demand is relentless. Sound familiar? During this rush, a small number of 1964 Lincoln pennies struck at the Denver Mint received a highly unusual and undocumented mint error. These coins display characteristics that should never exist together: metal composition inconsistencies, striking anomalies, and die variations that defy standard mint records. Coins like these were never meant to leave the mint. Yet they did. And when something is not supposed to exist, collectors don't just want it, they chase it. Now here's a quick pattern interrupt before we go further. If you've ever checked your couch cushions for loose change, congratulations, you've already practiced treasure hunting. The only difference now is the treasure could buy the couch, the house, and the vacation home. Act 2 is where excitement turns into urgency. Over the last few years, elite collectors, high-end auction houses, and private buyers have zeroed in on verified examples of this 1964 Lincoln penny error. Why? Because demand has exploded while supply has remained effectively frozen. These coins are not being made again. There is no second chance. Every time one surfaces, the market tightens. Prices don't drift upward, they jump. One authenticated specimen recently pushed the market valuation to $785,000, and experts agree this figure reflects demand, not hype. Coins like this sit at the intersection of history, scarcity, and emotional value. They represent a moment when the system failed just enough to create opportunity. And collectors understand something most people don't: rare coins are not just objects. They are portable wealth. Here's the part that should make you lean in closer. Many of these pennies were spent, circulated, mixed into everyday change. They were not locked away by collectors at birth. That means some still exist outside of collections, sitting unnoticed in old jars, inherited boxes, safety deposit containers, or estate holdings. If you've ever inherited coins and thought, "I'll deal with that later," later may have just arrived. Let's reset your attention for a second with a simple thought. People check stock prices every day, yet ignore assets they physically own. Isn't it strange how we fear missing market crashes but overlook market miracles sitting at home? Act 3 is where vision meets action. The reason high net worth individuals aggressively pursue coins like the 1964 Lincoln penny error is simple. These assets are private, tangible, historically significant, and immune to many of the risks that erode traditional wealth. They don't depend on interest rates, political promises, or corporate earnings calls. They depend on rarity. And rarity only moves in one direction. For those who own such a coin, the opportunity is transformational. This is not about spare change. This is about converting overlooked history into life-changing capital. It's about funding retirement on your terms, upgrading your lifestyle, creating security for your family, or simply enjoying the freedom that comes from knowing you recognized value when others didn't. And here's an important truth, delivered with authority and optimism. The market is watching. Buyers are active. Demand is strong. And the window for discovering these coins before they disappear permanently into private collections is narrowing. Once they're locked away, they're gone for decades. The people who benefit are not always the loudest or the luckiest. They are the ones who paid attention. So if you have old Lincoln pennies, especially dated 1964 with a Denver mint mark, do not assume you know their worth. Do not clean them. Do not dismiss them. Have them evaluated professionally. Knowledge, in this space, is not just power, it's profit. Imagine this for a moment. You're holding a single penny. Not a gold bar. Not a stock certificate. A penny. The same kind you've ignored your entire life, tossed into jars, dropped into couch cushions, or left behind at gas stations. Now imagine that penny quietly carrying a price tag of $783,000. Sounds impossible, right? That reaction, that disbelief, is exactly why fortunes are missed every single day. Because the most powerful opportunities rarely announce themselves. And today, we're stepping into one of the most fascinating, misunderstood, and high-demand coin stories in American history, the 1968 no-mint mark Lincoln penny, a coin that has turned ordinary people into very wealthy ones. This is not a fairy tale. This is not hype. This is history colliding with human error, scarcity, and raw demand. And here's the uncomfortable question most people don't like to ask themselves: what if the next life-changing asset is already in your possession, and you simply don't recognize it? Stay with me, because by the end of this story, you may never look at pocket change the same way again. Let's begin with Act 1. The moment everything changed. The year was 1968. America was loud, tense, and transforming. While the nation focused on war, politics, and cultural upheaval, something far quieter happened inside the U.S. Mint. Coin presses were running at full speed, millions of Lincoln pennies striking metal day and night. But in the chaos of mass production, mistakes happened. Tiny mistakes. Human mistakes. Mechanical mistakes. And when those mistakes slipped past quality control, history was sealed in copper. Now here's where things get interesting. Coins minted in Philadelphia during that era carried no mint mark at all. That alone isn't rare. But when a no-mint mark penny combines with specific, documented minting errors, something extraordinary happens. We're talking about precision errors so subtle that millions of people would never notice them, and yet so powerful that elite collectors will pay nearly $750,000 to own one verified example. Yes, one coin. One moment of imperfection. One opportunity frozen in time. And let me pause right here for a quick reality check. If you're thinking, come on, how could a penny be worth more than my house? Congratulations. That skepticism is healthy. But it's also exactly what kept others from checking their coins, until someone else did and walked away with generational wealth. Funny how that works, isn't it? Act 2 is where fear, excitement, and urgency collide. Because once collectors and investors discovered these rare 1968 no-mint mark era pennies, the market changed permanently. High-end numismatists, auction houses, and private buyers began hunting aggressively. Why? Because coins like this are non-renewable assets. The U.S. Mint will never strike another 1968 penny. Errors cannot be recreated. Every verified specimen locked away in a private collection permanently reduces supply. Demand, meanwhile, only moves in one direction, up, and this is where fear enters the room. Fear of missing out. Fear of ignorance. Fear of realizing too late that something valuable passed right through your hands. Because right now, there are Americans, many in their 40s, 50s, and 60s, who unknowingly inherited jars of coins, old coffee cans, or forgotten collections from parents and grandparents. Some of those coins have already been spent. Others are still sitting quietly in drawers. And the uncomfortable truth is this: every year you wait, the window narrows. Coins are lost. Coins are damaged. Coins are sold cheaply by people who never knew what they had. Here's a question that snaps attention right back. If someone offered to buy your penny for $783,000 today, would you laugh, or would you wish you hadn't spent it 10 years ago on a soda? Humor aside, this is serious money, and serious money follows serious verification. High-value Lincoln pennies with no mint mark and rare errors are being graded, authenticated, and aggressively pursued. Not someday. Right now, Act 3 is where transformation happens. Because this story isn't just about a coin. It's about awareness. It's about recognizing that wealth doesn't always come dressed in luxury, it often arrives disguised as something ordinary. The people who benefit most from rare coins aren't gamblers. They're observers. They're the ones who pause before dismissing what others ignore. They understand that history, scarcity, and demand create value far beyond face price, and here's the empowering part. You don't need to be a Wall Street insider. You don't need a vault full of gold. You need curiosity. You need patience. And you need the courage to look twice. That old 1968 Lincoln penny with no mint mark may not look like much. But under magnification, under expert evaluation, it could reveal the very traits collectors are desperate for. And when that happens, you're no longer holding spare change, you're holding leverage. The market doesn't wait for hesitation. High net worth buyers move quietly and decisively. Auction records are set when the right coin meets the right moment. And moments like these don't repeat often. That's why the smartest move isn't selling in panic or ignoring in doubt. The smartest move is knowing exactly what you have before making any decision at all. So tonight, ask yourself this. What's sitting in your home right now that you've never truly examined? What small object could be carrying a story worth hundreds of thousands of dollars? Because wealth isn't always earned, it's often discovered. And the difference between those who live comfortably and those who live exceptionally is simple. Imagine pulling a penny from an old coffee can, the kind that's been sitting quietly in a drawer since Nixon was in office, and realizing that this single cent could be worth more than a luxury home. Sounds impossible, right? Stay with me, because the 1969 Lincoln penny is one of the most misunderstood, most hunted, and most quietly powerful coins in American history. And if you're holding the right one, the market is whispering numbers as high as $735,000. Yes, for a penny. And before you laugh and click away, ask yourself this one question: what if the rarest asset in your life isn't in your portfolio, but in your pocket? 1969 was a turbulent year in the United States. The country was changing, the economy was shifting, and the U.S. Mint was producing billions of Lincoln cents at a speed that left little room for perfection. In Denver, marked by a small D beneath the date, pennies rolled off the presses day and night. Most were ordinary, disposable, forgotten. But history has a way of hiding fortune inside chaos. A microscopic mistake during the die creation process, something only a trained eye would catch decades later, created a rare error variety that would ignite obsession among elite collectors. This is where excitement turns real, because coin experts know one truth: the rarest treasures never announce themselves loudly. They sit quietly, waiting for someone who knows what to look for. The 1969 Lincoln penny error is so elusive that most people dismiss it entirely, which is exactly why it matters. In the coin world, rarity plus doubt equals explosive value. When only a handful of examples are believed to exist in true collectible condition, demand doesn't knock politely, it kicks the door down. Advanced collectors, private buyers, and high-end auction houses are constantly searching for coins like this, because once authenticated, they don't just hold value, they redefine it. Now here's where fear enters the story, and it's an uncomfortable kind. Thousands of Americans have unknowingly spent, sold, or ignored rare coins because they assumed all pennies are the same. The biggest financial mistakes aren't reckless ones, they're silent ones. Coins like the 1969 D-era often live in inherited collections, estate boxes, old piggy banks, or rolls tucked away for someday. And someday passes. What makes this penny so dangerous to overlook is that at first glance, it looks ordinary. Lincoln's face. Wheatless reverse. Brown copper tone. Nothing flashy. But under magnification, under expert analysis, the details can tell a very different story, and that difference can be worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. The current market for rare U.S. coin errors is not slowing down. It's accelerating. Wealthy collectors are moving hard assets out of volatile markets and into tangible history. Pennies like the 1969 D-era are in extreme demand, not because they're trendy, but because they're nearly impossible to replace. When one surfaces and is properly authenticated, competition becomes fierce, emotional, and fast. Some valuations and private offers have reached as high as $735,000, especially when condition, originality, and verification align perfectly. And here's the urgency most people miss: as more coins are discovered or conclusively ruled out, the window of opportunity narrows. Scarcity sharpens. Prices don't wait. This is where the story turns from curiosity into possibility. Owning a rare coin isn't just about money, it's about leverage. It's about turning forgotten history into financial freedom. For many Americans between 30 and 65, rare coins have quietly funded retirements, paid off homes, and created generational wealth. Not through luck. Through awareness. Through taking action when others hesitated. The 1969 D. Lincoln penny represents that crossroads. Ignore it, and it remains a penny. Respect it, research it, authenticate it, and it can become a life-changing asset. That if you believe you may have a 1969 D. Lincoln penny, the most powerful move you can make right now is education followed by verification. Serious buyers don't chase guesses, they chase certified truth. And the moment a rare coin is confirmed, the conversation changes. Quietly. Quickly. Permanently. History rewards those who recognize value before the crowd does. This penny is not hype. It's not fantasy. It's a reminder that wealth doesn't always come from chasing the future, sometimes it comes from understanding the past. So tonight, before you scroll past another opportunity, ask yourself one final question: what else in your life have you underestimated? Because somewhere, maybe in a drawer, maybe in a box you haven't opened in years, American history could be waiting to pay you back, 1 cent at a time. What if I told you that a single penny, yes, one humble Lincoln cent, has been linked to values as high as $732,000? Not a gold bar. Not a stock certificate. A penny. And before your brain jumps to disbelief, pause for a second and ask yourself this uncomfortable question: what if the most valuable thing you own right now is something you've completely ignored? This story begins in 1970, a year of transition in America. The country was changing, industries were evolving, and the U.S. Mint was producing millions of Lincoln pennies, most of them ordinary, forgettable, and worth exactly 1 cent. But hidden among them was a rare mistake, a deviation so subtle that even seasoned collectors missed it for years. The 1970 D. Lincoln penny, struck at the Denver Mint, became one of the most fascinating examples of how imperfection can create extreme value. And here's the irony: this coin wasn't valuable because it was perfect. It was valuable because something went wrong. Now let me ask you something that might make you uncomfortable. How many coins have passed through your hands in your lifetime? Thousands? Tens of thousands? And how many did you actually inspect? Exactly. That's where fear quietly creeps in, the fear that you might have already spent something extraordinary without knowing it. The 1970 D penny error isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't shine like gold. It waits patiently for someone educated enough to recognize it. And those who do, they step into a completely different financial conversation. Here's where excitement kicks in. Certain 1970 Lincoln pennies were struck with dramatic errors, notably rare double dies and transitional anomalies that shouldn't exist, but do. These coins escaped quality control and entered circulation, hiding in plain sight for decades. When high-grade examples surfaced and were authenticated, the numismatic world took notice. Auction records exploded. Private sales intensified. Demand skyrocketed. And suddenly, a coin once dismissed as pocket change was being discussed in the same breath as luxury real estate. Imagine explaining to your friends that a penny helped fund your retirement. Go ahead, picture their faces. At this point, some people laugh. They say, "Come on, it's just a penny." That laugh is a pattern interrupt, because history has proven that the people who laugh first are often the ones who regret last. The same thing happened with rare baseball cards, classic watches, and early Bitcoin. Value is never obvious at the beginning. It reveals itself later, to those who paid attention. And the 1970 Lincoln penny has become a symbol of that truth. In a market driven by scarcity and condition, demand doesn't ask for permission, it simply rises. This brings us to the heart of the story: urgency. The supply of these error coins is permanently limited. No more are being made. Every year, more are lost, damaged, or locked away in private collections. Meanwhile, interest in rare U.S. coinage continues to grow, especially among serious buyers with real money who understand tangible assets. When a market reaches this stage, prices don't gently climb, they jump. And those who wait for someday often discover that someday was yesterday. Now here's a question that resets attention: if you own something that could change your financial future, wouldn't you want to know before it's too late? Many people sitting at kitchen tables across America have inherited coin collections, old jars, forgotten rolls, and family keepsakes. They don't look valuable, but neither did the most expensive examples, until the right expert examined them. The difference between 1 cent and generational wealth is often education and timing. And timing, right now, is everything. This isn't about gambling. This isn't about hype. This is about understanding that rare coins are no longer a niche hobby, they are a serious asset class. Wealthy collectors don't chase what's common. They compete for what's rare, historic, and impossible to replace. The 1970 Lincoln penny error sits at that intersection. It represents American history, minting anomalies, and the psychological power of scarcity. And when something checks all those boxes, demand doesn't fade, it intensifies. As we reach the final act of this story, the message becomes clear. Somewhere, right now, a 1970 Lincoln penny sits unnoticed, waiting for someone who understands its significance. Maybe it's in a drawer. Maybe it's in an inherited collection. Maybe it passed through your hands years ago. The real question isn't whether these coins are valuable, the market has already answered that. The question is whether you're positioned to recognize opportunity when it's staring back at you from the palm of your hand. What if I told you that a single penny, yes, a penny you might have ignored your entire life, has been connected to valuations as high as $753,000? Not a gold bar. Not a stock tip from Wall Street. A Lincoln penny. Now here's the uncomfortable question most people don't like to ask themselves: how many of these have already passed through your hands without you ever realizing what they were worth? That thought alone should make you pause, because history has a habit of rewarding the people who pay attention, and quietly punishing those who don't. In 1971, while America was focused on moon missions, economic shifts, and a changing financial system, something far more subtle happened inside the U.S. Mint. Coins were struck, inspected, approved, and a few slipped through that never should have existed in the first place. Among them was the 1971 Lincoln penny, minted in San Francisco, carrying characteristics that today are whispered about in serious collector circles. This isn't the kind of thing you hear discussed at family dinners. This is the kind of thing auction houses talk about behind closed doors. Now before you brush this off and think, I would have heard about this already, let me ask you something. When was the last time life-changing money announced itself loudly? Exactly. Wealth usually hides in plain sight, and it waits for the right person to recognize it. The San Francisco Mint mark, the small but powerful S beneath the date, is more than just a letter. It's a signature. A fingerprint. And in 1971, certain pennies bearing that mark were produced with rare anomalies, errors that transformed an ordinary copper coin into something extraordinary. These are not damaged coins. They are not mistakes made by collectors. They are mint origin errors, the kind that cannot be recreated, duplicated, or manufactured again. Once they exist, that's it. The supply is permanently frozen in time. Here's where things get interesting, and yes, a little uncomfortable. Many of these coins sat in jars, drawers, old wallets, even inherited collections for decades. They were spent on coffee. Dropped into tip jars. Lost in couch cushions. Imagine using a winning lottery ticket as a bookmark and never checking the numbers. It sounds ridiculous, until you realize it's happened more times than anyone wants to admit. Collectors and high-end buyers don't chase hype. They chase scarcity, authenticity, and historical relevance. And the 1971 S. Lincoln penny checks all three boxes when the right error is present. That's why certain verified examples have commanded staggering attention, with market discussions reaching into the hundreds of thousands of dollars. Not because of luck. Because of demand. Because once a serious buyer knows one exists, the question isn't, do I want it? The question becomes, how do I get it before someone else does? And here's a moment to reset your attention. Quick question. If you found out tomorrow that something in your house could dramatically change your financial future, would you still finish watching this video? Of course you would. And that's exactly why you're still here. Right now, there is a quiet urgency building in the coin market. More people are waking up. More collections are being examined. More rare pieces are being authenticated. And as awareness increases, availability disappears. That's how high-demand markets work. The window doesn't slam shut loudly, it closes slowly, while most people are still deciding whether to look. This isn't just about money. It's about control. It's about knowing that the wealth you're looking for might not be in the future, but already in your possession. That old box of coins isn't clutter. It's potential. And potential, when recognized, has a habit of turning into leverage. Leverage turns into options. And options? That's what wealthy lifestyles are built on. The people who succeed in this space aren't gamblers. They're observers. They're the ones who understand that history leaves clues, and value leaves patterns. When a coin like the 1971 S. Lincoln penny enters serious demand territory, it doesn't go backward. It moves into stronger hands, private collections, and vaults. And once that happens, the conversation shifts from, is it valuable, to, who owns it now? So here's the final thought I'll leave you with. Somewhere in America tonight, someone is unknowingly sitting on a coin that could rewrite their financial story. The only difference between them and the person who eventually cashes in, is awareness. Fear keeps people from looking. Excitement pushes them to act. Urgency reminds them that time is not unlimited. Imagine this for a moment. Somewhere in America, right now, a small brown coin is sitting quietly in a drawer, a jar, maybe even a forgotten coffee can in the garage. It doesn't shine. It doesn't scream, treasure. And yet, if this coin could talk, it might whisper a number that changes everything, $734,000. Sounds unbelievable, right? That's exactly why most people miss it. Because the biggest fortunes don't always look like fortunes at first glance. And tonight, you're about to discover why the 1979 United States Lincoln penny with no mint mark has become one of the most talked about and hunted modern coin errors in America. Stay with me, because what you're about to hear could completely change the way you look at every penny you own. This story begins in 1979, a year that didn't feel historic at the time. Gas was cheap compared to today, disco was everywhere, and nobody was paying attention to pennies. The U.S. Mint in Philadelphia was producing millions upon millions of Lincoln cents, most of them released with no mint mark at all. That was normal. Ordinary. Boring. Or so everyone thought. But history has a funny habit of hiding its secrets in plain sight. And decades later, collectors began to notice something unsettling, a tiny group of 1979 pennies that weren't just different, but dangerously different. Coins struck under rare conditions, carrying minting errors so subtle that only trained eyes could spot them, and so valuable that elite collectors would later compete fiercely to own them. Now here's where the fear kicks in. What if you've already had one of these coins in your hands, and spent it? What if it slipped through your fingers for 1 cent because no one ever told you what to look for? That uncomfortable feeling in your stomach right now? That's awareness waking up. And awareness is powerful. Because once you know, you can never unknow. And the truth is, some of these 1979 no-mint mark Lincoln pennies, those with specific, authenticated error characteristics, have reached legendary status in the collector market. Verified examples tied to extreme minting anomalies have been valued as high as $734,000, not because of hype, but because wealthy collectors understand one thing most people don't: rarity creates power. Let's pause for a second, quick reality check. When was the last time a penny paid for someone's retirement? Exactly. That's the pattern interrupt. Because this isn't about spare change. This is about leverage. This is about knowing something others overlook. High-end collectors don't chase shiny objects, they chase scarcity. And the 1979 no-mint mark penny error sits in that rare intersection of modern familiarity and extreme rarity. Everyone recognizes it, but almost no one truly understands it. That contrast alone drives demand through the roof. Act 2 of our story is where excitement takes over. As auction houses and private dealers began documenting rare error specimens, the market shifted. Quietly at first. Then loudly. Pennies once dismissed as pocket clutter started appearing in elite collections, graded, certified, and fiercely protected. Each sale didn't just confirm value, it increased it. Because every time one of these rare coins disappears into a private vault, the supply shrinks even further. And when supply shrinks in a market driven by wealthy buyers, prices don't fall. They explode. This is where urgency enters the room. Coins like this are not being made anymore. The window is closing. Every year, more are lost, damaged, or spent by people who simply don't know what they have. Meanwhile, demand is moving in the opposite direction. More collectors. More money. More competition. If you've ever thought, "I'll check my coins someday," that someday may already be costing you. And let's be honest, future you would be pretty upset knowing you ignored a potential 6-figure opportunity because it felt inconvenient. And here's a little humor to reset the brain. People will binge watch an entire season of a show about fictional treasure hunters but won't spend 5 minutes checking a real coin sitting in their own house. Irony at its finest. But you're not like most people. You're here because you're curious, because you're open, and because you understand that wealth often begins with attention. Act 3 is about transformation. This isn't just a story about a penny. It's a story about mindset. About stepping into a world where knowledge creates advantage. Where patience becomes profit. Where something as small as a 1979 Lincoln cent can open the door to a more secure, abundant lifestyle. The people who succeed in this space don't rush, and they don't guess. They verify. They authenticate. They position themselves where serious buyers are already waiting. And when the right coin meets the right market, the results can be life-changing. So here's the question that lingers, and it's meant to. If a single penny can be worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, what else have you been overlooking? Somewhere nearby, history may be waiting for you to recognize it. And the difference between regret and reward often comes down to one decision: to look closer. Because in the world of rare coins, those who act with awareness don't just collect history, they convert it into wealth. And yet, what if that ordinary-looking penny was quietly worth more than most homes in America? What if it carried a price tag whispered in elite coin circles at up to $737,000? That's not fantasy. That's not hype. That's the kind of headline that makes seasoned collectors sit up straight, and it begins with one specific coin, the 1979 D. Lincoln penny with a rare mint error. If your heart just skipped a beat, good. It should. Because the biggest financial surprises usually come disguised as the smallest objects. Let's slow this down, because this story deserves respect. Act 1 begins in Denver, 1979. The U.S. Mint was striking millions of Lincoln cents every single day. Machines were loud, fast, relentless. And in environments like that, mistakes don't ask for permission. They slip through. A mint mark slightly wrong. A die misaligned. A strike that shouldn't exist but does. Most errors are caught and destroyed. A microscopic few escape into circulation, unnoticed, uncelebrated, and completely underestimated. That's where fear quietly enters the room. Fear that you may have already spent one. Fear that you might still have one and not know it. Fear that history is hiding in plain sight, right under your nose. And yes, before you laugh and say, "Come on, it's just a penny," remember this: every legendary coin started as just a coin. Now here's the twist that wakes people up. The 1979 D. Lincoln penny is not rare by date alone. Millions were made. But rarity in this world doesn't come from age or face value. It comes from errors that should not exist. Specific mint mark anomalies and striking errors on select 1979 D pennies have created a feeding frenzy among high-end collectors. When authenticated, graded, and verified, these coins are no longer pocket change. They become trophies. And in recent private transactions and high-profile valuations, numbers as high as $737,000 have been attached to exceptional specimens. Read that again. Not for a roll. Not for a box. For a single penny. If that doesn't reset your brain, let me ask you something slightly uncomfortable. When was the last time you actually looked at your change? Act 2 is where excitement takes over. Because this isn't just a coin story, it's a wealth story. The kind people wish they had paid attention to earlier. Collectors in their 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s are waking up to the reality that the coins they grew up with are now the coins everyone wants. Demand is not casual anymore. Serious money is chasing verified error coins, and supply is brutally limited. Once a top-tier specimen is locked into a private collection, it often disappears for decades. That scarcity creates urgency. And urgency creates opportunity for the few who are holding without realizing it. It's almost humorous in a painful way, isn't it? We'll Google stock tips for hours, but ignore a penny that could outperform most retirement plans. Funny. Until it's not. Here's where authority matters. Professional grading, authentication, and provenance separate a life-changing asset from a conversation piece. This is not about guessing or hoping. This is about knowing. High-end buyers don't gamble, they verify. And when a legitimate 1979 D error penny hits the market, competition can be fierce. Quiet phone calls. Private negotiations. Serious buyers who don't blink at six-figure numbers because they understand one thing very clearly: demand is rising, and these coins are not being made again. The window doesn't slam shut loudly. It closes silently, while most people are still distracted. Act 3 is the moment of decision. This is where stories split into regret and reward. Somewhere in America tonight, someone has a coin jar they haven't touched in years. Somewhere else, someone already sold a rare penny for a few cents because they didn't know what to look for. And somewhere else, someone recognized history in their hand and changed their financial trajectory forever. The difference wasn't luck. It was awareness. The market for rare US era coins is not cooling down. It's maturing. And mature markets don't chase hype, they chase quality. That's why coins like the 1979 D. Lincoln penny with verified errors are spoken about with respect, urgency, and yes, a little bit of a WE.SO. Here's the final thought, and it's meant to linger. Wealth doesn't always arrive in the form you expect. Sometimes it's loud. Sometimes it's glamorous. And sometimes, it's copper-colored, 1 cent at a time, waiting for the right eyes to see it. Imagine this for a moment. Somewhere in America, right now, a single penny sits quietly in a drawer, a jar, maybe even your pocket. It looks ordinary. Harmless. Forgettable. And yet, that 1 cent coin could be worth $734,000. Yes, you heard that right. More than $500,000 hiding in plain sight. And here's the uncomfortable question most people don't want to ask themselves: what if you already own it, and don't even know? Stay with me, because in the next few minutes, what you're about to learn could completely change the way you look at your old coins, and your financial future. This story begins in 1991, a year many people remember for big headlines, not small change. The U.S. Mint was producing millions of Lincoln pennies as usual, and at the Denver Mint, marked with a small but powerful D, everything seemed routine. But history has a funny way of rewarding accidents. Somewhere in that production process, something went wrong. A mistake so subtle that it slipped past inspectors, cashiers, banks, and collectors alike. And that mistake transformed a 1 cent coin into a six-figure treasure. This is not speculation. This is not hype. This is a documented, elite-level coin error that serious collectors compete aggressively to own. Now let's pause for a second, because here's a pattern interrupt. Be honest. If I asked you 5 minutes ago what a 1991 penny was worth, you probably would have said, 1 cent. Maybe 2 if you're feeling generous. That's exactly why coins like this still surface. The biggest fortunes aren't always loud. Sometimes they whisper. Act 1 is all about ignorance and innocence. For decades, Americans spent, saved, and ignored 1991 Lincoln pennies without a second thought. They were dropped into tip jars, tossed into piggy banks, and buried in coffee cans in garages across the country. Meanwhile, a rare error version, created by a highly specific minting anomaly, escaped into circulation. Most people never noticed. And that's where the fear comes in. Because every year that passes is another year someone unknowingly spends a coin that could have paid off their house, funded retirement, or changed their family's legacy forever. Act 2 is where awareness turns into excitement. When expert numismatists finally identified this 1991 penny error, the market reacted fast and decisively. Advanced collectors recognized the rarity immediately. We're talking about a coin with an error so scarce that demand now far exceeds supply. High-grade authenticated examples have reached current market values as high as $734,000, and serious buyers are actively hunting for more. This isn't a someday maybe coin. This is a right now coin. A coin people with real money are chasing, and here's something most videos won't tell you. The wealthy don't wait for opportunities to knock politely. They look for undervalued assets hiding in boring places. That's why rare coins have quietly created millionaires for generations. While everyone else was distracted by stocks, real estate, and headlines, coin collectors were building wealth one historical mistake at a time. And the 1991 Lincoln penny error is one of those mistakes the market can't get enough of. Now let me ask you a slightly uncomfortable, but powerful, question. When was the last time you actually looked closely at your old coins? Not glanced. Looked. Because the difference between a regular penny and a life-changing one can be smaller than the thickness of a human hair. And yes, that's frustrating. But it's also thrilling. Because it means opportunity hasn't passed you by yet. Act 3 is where urgency meets action. The demand for elite U.S. coin errors is exploding, especially among high-net-worth collectors who want tangible assets with history, scarcity, and prestige. These buyers aren't negotiating from desperation. They're competing. And competition drives prices higher. Every authenticated example that enters a private collection reduces supply even further. Which means the window to discover and sell one of these coins is narrowing. Here's the humorous truth: your grandparents weren't hoarders. They were accidental investors. Those jars of pennies everyone joked about. Some of them are turning out to be treasure chests. And the people who win aren't the loudest or the luckiest. They're the ones who paid attention before everyone else caught on. This is why you're watching this video. Not for entertainment. For awareness. Because knowledge is leverage, and leverage creates wealth. Somewhere in your home, or in a collection you inherited, or in coins you've ignored for years, there may be something extraordinary waiting for the right eyes. And once the market fully absorbs how rare this error truly is, the next conversation won't be about whether it's valuable, but whether it's already too late. So here's your moment. Don't rush, but don't delay. Respect the process. Educate yourself. Have your coins evaluated professionally. Because the difference between living comfortably and living extraordinarily sometimes comes down to recognizing value where others see nothing. Imagine this for a moment. Somewhere in America, right now, a small copper coin is sitting quietly in a drawer, a jar, maybe even your pocket. It doesn't shine like gold. It doesn't scream wealth. And yet, collectors and investors are willing to pay up to $757,000 for it. Not for a bar of gold. Not for a luxury watch. But for a 1994 Lincoln penny with no mint mark. And here's the uncomfortable question that should immediately grab your attention: what if you already own one, and don't even know it? This story begins the same way most life-changing stories do, with something ordinary. In 1994, millions of Lincoln pennies were struck in the United States. People used them for coffee, parking meters, and grocery change. No one stopped to admire them. No one imagined that decades later, a single error, one missing detail, would turn this humble coin into one of the most aggressively hunted modern U.S. rarities. And that's the irony that makes seasoned collectors smile and beginners nervous. Because history doesn't always announce itself when it's happening. Sometimes, it whispers, "Now let me ask you something, and be honest. When was the last time you really looked at a penny? I mean really looked. Not tossed it into a cup holder like it owed you money. Not ignored it like an unwanted receipt." Because the 1994 no mint mark Lincoln penny is a perfect example of how wealth hides in plain sight. No dramatic design change. No flashy stamp. Just a missing mint mark where one should exist. That tiny absence is exactly what has driven demand through the roof. Funny how in life, what's missing often matters more than what's there, isn't it? Here's where the story shifts, and where the stakes rise. This coin wasn't supposed to exist in its rare form. Minting standards are strict, controlled, and monitored. Yet somehow, a small number of 1994 pennies escaped the system without a mint mark, creating a genuine mint error, not damage, not wear, not wishful thinking. Serious collectors know the difference. High-end buyers know the difference. Auction houses know the difference. And when a verified example appears on the market, the reaction isn't casual interest, it's urgency. Phones ring. Private offers surface. Bidding wars ignite. Because when supply is microscopic and demand is global, price becomes almost irrelevant, and this is where fear quietly enters the room. Fear of missing out. Fear of having already spent something priceless. Fear of realizing, years too late, that you once held generational wealth between your fingers and let it slip away for a soda or a parking ticket. It sounds dramatic, until you remember it's happened before. Many times. With coins. With stamps. With art. With real estate. History is ruthless to those who don't pay attention, but let's pause. Quick pattern interrupt. Imagine explaining to your spouse that you unknowingly spent a coin now worth more than your house. Awkward dinner conversation, right? That uncomfortable laugh you just felt. That's your instinct telling you this matters. Now let's talk excitement, because this isn't just about fear. This is about possibility. The 1994 no mint mark Lincoln penny has become a symbol of modern American numismatic opportunity. Unlike ancient coins locked in museums, this one still surfaces. Still surprises families. Still changes lives. Verified examples have commanded astonishing valuations, with top-tier specimens reaching figures around $757,000, driven by condition, authenticity, and timing. And the market isn't slowing down. As more Americans look to hard assets, tangible wealth, and alternative investments, rare coins are no longer a hobby, they're a strategy, and here's the part most people don't connect until it's too late. Coins like this aren't just collectibles. They're portable wealth. Tax-advantaged in many cases. Private. Liquid. Globally recognized. While markets fluctuate and currencies lose purchasing power, rarity only becomes rarer. The demand for iconic US-era coins continues to rise, especially among buyers who understand history, scarcity, and legacy. These aren't impulse purchases. These are calculated moves by people who think in decades, not days. So let me ask you another question: what is sitting in your home right now that you've never evaluated properly? A jar. A box. A forgotten envelope. Because the truth is, the opportunity window doesn't stay open forever. As more coins are discovered, graded, and locked into private collections, availability tightens. And when availability tightens, prices don't ask for permission to climb. They just do. This is the final act of the story, and it's where action matters. The people who benefit from moments like this aren't the ones who wait for certainty. They're the ones who recognize patterns. The ones who understand that extraordinary outcomes often come from ordinary objects examined with extraordinary attention. The 1994 no-mint Mark Lincoln penny represents more than money. It represents awareness, timing, and the quiet confidence of knowing that wealth doesn't always look wealthy at first glance. So tonight, before you dismiss another penny, remember this story. Remember that history rewards curiosity. Remember that scarcity creates power. And remember that somewhere out there, possibly very close to you, is a small copper coin that has already rewritten someone else's financial future.